story about Daniel. Can you remember last week we heard that Daniel was taken by the king of Babylon from his home in Jerusalem all the way to Babylon, and what happened to him there? Well, we've moved on a little bit. He is the king of Babylon. We're going to hear a little bit more about him today. His name, very funny name, was Nebuchadnezzar. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Well, Nebuchadnezzar started to have this very strange dream. I must admit, I don't dream very much myself. But he had this same dream night after night after night. And he didn't know what it meant. And he wasn't getting any sleep, and he was getting a bit grouchy. So he called all the wise men of his country together, and he said, now listen, I'm having this very strange dream, and I want you to tell me what it means. So the wise men looked at each other and had a bit of a chat and said, well, Your Majesty, if you tell us what the dream is, we'll interpret it for you. That means we'll tell you what it means. No, said the king, that's not what I want. I want you to tell me what the dream is and then to tell me what it means. So the wise men said, well, I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but nobody on earth can tell you what your dream is. We can only tell you what it means once you've told us. The king said, well, that's no good to me. If you can't do what I ask, I'm going to have you all killed. Oh! The wise men, about themselves. Can you do it? And they shook their heads because they hadn't a clue what his dream was. If they'd known what it was, they might have been able to tell him. So he had his chief of the guards collect all the wise men together and take them away to be killed. But unfortunately, there was another person that the king considered to be one of his wise men. Yes, you've got it. It was Daniel. And so the head of the guards went off to pick up Daniel. And of course, his 3 friends. Can you remember who they were? They had funny names too. This one was called Shadrach. Then we had Meshach. And then the one that I think's got the funniest of names, Abednego or Abednego. And so the guard came and he rapped on the door of Daniel's house. Daniel says, hello, what is it? And so the guard told him about the king's dream, that the wise men couldn't tell him what it was or what it meant, and he was going to have all the wise men, including Daniel and his friends, killed. Daniel said, well, I think I need to speak to the king. Could I go and speak to him? So the guard thought, well, there's nothing losing here. So he took Daniel to meet the king. And the king told Daniel what he said to the other wise men. And Daniel said, well, Your Majesty, there's nobody on earth, nobody human, who can tell you what your dream is, and to be quite honest, not really to tell you what it meant. And before the king could say another word, Daniel said, but I know there is a God in heaven who knows all things. I'll talk to him and he'll tell me what you want to know. So the king thought about this and he was really desperate to find out what the dream meant. So he said, all right, you can have till tomorrow. So Daniel and his 3 friends went back home and they prayed to God that God would reveal to Daniel what the king wanted to know. And this is what they said. They said, Praise God for ever and ever. Wisdom and power is his. That's what Daniel had told the king. I can't do it. No one can. But my God can. So the next morning, Daniel and his friends were taken back to the king. And the king said, "Well, have you spoken to your God?" "Oh yes," said Daniel. "And I can tell you what your dream is and what it means." He said, "Your dream is about the future. Something none of us know about." He says, "And you dream of a statue, a big statue." And the king said, "That's right, I did." And Daniel says, "And the statue had a golden head." "Yes," said the king. And then Daniel went on and he said, "And it also had a chest and arms of silver." "Right again," said the king. "And it had a stomach and thighs of bronze." By this time the king was really interested, because Daniel was absolutely right. "And," said Daniel, "it had legs of iron, and its feet were made of iron and bronze." Can you see? Two different types. "That's exactly it," said the king. "But what does it mean?" "Well," said Daniel, "these 5 different metals mean 5 different kingdoms. This, the gold head, is you, King Nebuchadnezzar. That's your kingdom. That's your reign. After you, there will come another 4 kingdoms. The last one is 2 metals, because it's going to be a divided kingdom. There's going to be no unity among the people." And the king thought, "Oh, this is a very strange dream." But, says Daniel, "there is a stronger kingdom than all these. A kingdom like this stone. A kingdom not led by earthly kings, but by a heavenly king. God's kingdom, made up of people who trust in my God, the true God." And the king said, "Is it stronger than these kingdoms?" "The kingdom of my God is stronger than any earthly kingdom." Let's have a look at this and see if we can have a little demonstration. If we had a building like this that represented the kingdoms, if we took this stone and hit the top, well, we might lose 1 or 2 off the top. But if we went to the bottom of the pile and hit this feet of the statue, I wonder what would happen. It would be a bit like this, wouldn't it? Gosh, what happened there? The kingdom smashed all over the place, the statue. The kingdoms are all over. You see, that's because God's kingdom is stronger. Because God is stronger. He's wiser. He's more powerful. and yet he's more gracious and more loving. And Daniel said this: God, gives wisdom to people so they can be wise, and helps people learn and know things. God helped Daniel. He gave him the wisdom to know what the dream was. And he gave him the knowledge to understand what it meant so he could tell the king. And Daniel pressed upon the king, I can't do it, but my God can. And we are part of God's kingdom, the strongest kingdom that there will ever be. So let's make sure that we are part of that kingdom. And whatever goes on around us, remember, God's kingdom is better than any other. Our song this morning is about being part of God's family. And if we're part of his family, then we're part of his kingdom, and how his love can keep us stronger than anything.